our police as a way of sharing resources. And those are good things, those are good conversations. But it's shifting the whole paradigm on how we think about how our school districts are set up, whether it's North Reading versus that community. And, you know, we're on the brink here, in my mind, of some radical changes that are going to be forced on us without a lot of time to plan.
Bob and Marcy?
Yeah, there's a couple things that are going through my mind associated with this. Over a month ago, it may have been even longer than that, when the stimulus money first came out, on the national news, there was a story about a community in another state. And I don't recall the state or the community, but I do recall the issue. And they had been granted their stimulus money already, and this school didn't even need it or want it, but they had to take it. And basically, in the story, what was reported was that the government didn't have time, the federal government didn't have time to figure out how to divvy this money up. So they knew that each state in their allocations of funds for schools had a method, and they allowed the states to use that method. That's where this foundation thing came into play. And then a few weeks ago, talking to Senator Tarr, the question came up of, you know, where are we with the stimulus money? How come it isn't being distributed? You know, and the sum of money that the state was getting was a substantially larger amount of money. And it seemed like picking the foundation number was a number that was set for 2010 based on the rules of government associated with the distribution of this money. You know, and then that got me thinking back to this article where all the states are operating a little different because they're operating within the formulas that they've been using. So my thoughts are that, and why I use the ARRA money now, is that my thoughts are that there's more money out there, and the state just hasn't decided specifically what to do, A. And B is because the rules haven't been set up, right? You know, we're sitting here trying to think, which way to go. Now, you know, I know that everyone's trying to be conservative here, right? But before I'd go touch the stabilization money, I'd take the chance on the ARRA because, you know, I think there's more money coming.
The ARRA bill has in it, the law has in it, that the states are supposed to be using the vehicle or the methodology for distribution that they use daily or use regularly. So Massachusetts is using the formula that they would ordinarily use for Chapter 7 because that's how the state of Massachusetts dispenses school funds. So that's why they're using that.
Yeah,
There's a couple of other points. First off, foundation is too low. If you talk to anybody in all school committees across the state, foundation level is too low. And remember that there's 160 other communities that weren't funding up to foundation, that the state has said, well, we're going to bring you all up to that. So we're not alone, and there's, you know, the problem really is that the state hasn't developed a way of adequately funding schools. They're supposed to kick in enough through Chapter 70 to bring us up so that we can educate kids. Foundation is held too low because they can't come up with a way of getting more money. So it's a multiple problem at the state level. And it's all really is largely brought on by 2.5, and in our particular case, by the ratio of the number of people we have paying the bills and the number of kids we have in the school. That ratio for North Reading is very bad. Or it's not bad, we love our kids, but it's unfavorable from a financing standpoint.
Just a question.
the problem that that concerns me is that it's almost like, and I, not to put the governor down or the legislature down in the state, but, you know, if you're gonna offer this federal money based on whatever that percentage is, and maybe they are holding it back, and maybe there is more money available for next year, if they've already slashed Chapter 70 this year, and obviously that's a tool that they have, they want money somewhere else in the state budget, hey, if they get federal money coming to them, we can take that and put it right back in our coffers. Who's to say that's not gonna happen next year? And I would put money on the fact that it's gonna happen next year. Because we've seen the precedent and we haven't seen anything to tell us otherwise.
Remember the governor said that he was going to save Chapter 70 harmless.
The governor said a lot of
It's
things.
meaningless. It's meaningless. And I think he knew it. He's even more irritated.
Marcy?
Yeah, maybe it's the late hour, but I feel like I'm having a little bit of a major disconnect here. We are receiving this $853,000 because we are $853,000 below foundation. But we cannot spend, we're $853,000 below foundation in fiscal 10. But what you're saying is we cannot spend the $853,000 in fiscal 10 to bring us up to foundation.
Right, and we can't use it all in our operating budget.
That is
Even
just.
though
It makes no sense. It's
It
been
makes no,
making
I
sense
don't know if
from the
it's
beginning.
late, but it makes
It makes no sense and it
no
has from the
sense.
beginning.
That contradiction has been around for 3
Exactly.
months.
Right.
Pardon me, Bob?
That contradiction has been around for 3 months.
Yeah, they said-
But
they
it's
said-
just, it's so clear, you know, it's.
It's all political, you know, the government is political because he's saying he's bringing these communities up to foundation, but he's not.
It's not.
So,
It just means he doesn't have to address the formula for 2 more years,
Right.
another election cycle, because you've got your money now. Go ahead.
Can I just ask, the A is based on the foundation, that's forwarding. Now, why, how is the idea, how are we getting funding from that? Is it based on number of sped students in the district? I'm just curious how they came up with that number. And if there's any room to get more money from the IDEA recovery funds. I'm just curious where that number is coming from, if the other one's coming from the foundation. Sorry, that's too.
No, it's a great question, and we could spend a couple hours.
no, now you got Carl going.
But I'll be very brief. The foundation budget is a highly formularized budget that is based on the demographics of your students. On a monthly basis, we provide shocking detail of the ages, the IEPs, the second languages, the pre-K students in our district. And that information is converted to what your budget should be, given the demographics and needs of your students. So you can argue with the formula, the philosophy behind it, but that's what it is. So North Reading was $853,000 short of what an adequate education should have been for North Reading.
How about the IDA money though?
So
How do they?
I guess,
It's the same way, it's based on IEPs,
okay.
it's based on the stats.
So the idea for the money is based strictly on IEPs?
Correct.
Level of services?
Correct.
in
I
your
mean,
IEP?
every year,
Okay.
every city and town or every school district receives IDEA money. Normally, you don't, you're notified in about June, actually, we just heard May, that it's going up, how much?
16,000.
16,000. The regular IDEA. The stimulus money is an add-on to that, only over 2 years, and it's based on the same kind of formula, so that it's all formula-driven, it's percent-driven. We, for the first time this year, got some Title I money, which is another federal grant. That's linked to certain poverty economic levels, so not all of our schools get them. There is some stimulus money for Title I, we did not qualify for that, again, because it's economic formula driven. So, in a way, that IDEA money coming to the state of Massachusetts was spread out. That's how the department decided to, that was the formula, how every school district could apply to it. But on the other hand, they're reducing, or they're proposing to reduce the circuit breaker.
Right, I was
So,
just gonna
they-
say
you know, we give and we take at the same time.
We got the 160,000 for the IDA money, but we just had to amend our budget because they cut our circuit breaker, which is the special education emergency fund, kind of.
And that's what makes me nervous, for the same reason that in a heartbeat, 1 week's time, we're notified of a $648,000 drop in the current fiscal year, Chapter 78, which up to that point, every superintendent, every business manager, every school committee was told, we will keep Chapter 70, we will hold you harmless, we will not decrease that. And then in a matter of 1 day, 648,000, but don't worry about it, because we're going to relax the rules on the stimulus, accessing that stimulus money. And we'll get that application out to you in the middle of Wednesday by the next week, which they lived up to their promise, and you have until Friday to get that application in. And so Carl and all the business managers were dealing with the Department of Revenue on the very details of what's the best way to spend that. Keeping in mind that if you use federal money for salaries in a certain way, out goes 99% of that stimulus money. And so we have decided to spend it as an offset for health insurance, which changes all of the accounting procedures because it's coming out of grants and no longer coming out of budgets. And remember, it's not sustainable. And that 648,000, I believe, is you are using what was going to be coming to North Reading in fiscal year 11. I may be wrong, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah. And the circuit breaker hit was another one we didn't expect.
Change the threshold over which they pay, the percentage, both?
Percentage, they recommended lowering the percentage, I think, to about 50%, whereas they usually pay 70%.
Over a certain threshold?
Over a certain threshold, the
The threshold stayed
32,000.
the same?
The threshold stayed
The
the same.
threshold stayed the same?
Right,
percentage?
the percent
Lower
that they'll
percentage
pay.
over the threshold.
And in the original release of that Senate budget, the lowest level was 32%.
Right.
And it's now come back up to 50. So I suspect it will be somewhere higher than 50%, and the number that we put up here is, I think, our best estimate at this point. It's not gone too far, it's trying to hit that target so that we don't come up